Now that our browser is all set up, let's create our first GitHub repository and open it in Gitpod. So remember, we don't create our projects directly in the Gitpod environment. We create them in GitHub, and then we use our green Gitpod button, the browser extension, to open the project for editing. So let's walk through this. The first time you log back into GitHub, you'll see this page. You can create a repository in a couple of ways. You can click on this Start a Project button, or you can go to the Avatar menu, click on Your Repositories, and then click on New. Each one brings you to the same screen. So let's type a name for our repository. I'm going to call it My First Repo. Now note you can't use spaces in repository names, so I'm using dashes here to separate the words. We can leave our repository as public, and don't worry about initializing it with a README, we'll come to that a little bit later. And then click on the Create Repository button. Now when our repository is created, you can see that we have a screen with a whole load of code and commands on it. We don't need to worry about that. All we need to worry about is our little green Gitpod button, which is the extension that we installed in the last video. So when we click on that, it will launch Gitpod. And the very first time that we do this, we need to log in with GitHub and launch our workspace. And then we need to authorize Gitpod to be able to access our GitHub account. We agree to Gitpod's terms and conditions, and then create our free account. Then it will open the workspace for us. Now, as I said, we only have to do this the very first time that we connect Gitpod and GitHub together. After that, it's absolutely fine and it will open up very quickly. So after a little bit of configuration and creating a container, Gitpod will bring us to the editing environment. And again, the first time that you launch Gitpod, you'll get this little summary window to help you with some of the features. I'm just going to dismiss this. So we can see that this is our coding environment. And if you've ever used VS Code, then this will look familiar to you. Here is where our files will go. We have our editing area and a terminal window where we can type command line commands, which we'll come on to in the next section. So now you've created your first Gitpod workspace, and you can start creating files and folders. Many of the videos in this program were created using a different editor called Cloud9. So whenever you hear the instructor tell you to create a new Cloud9 workspace, you know that you need to make a new GitHub repository and click on the green Gitpod button. One more thing to tell you is that to reopen your workspace when you want to come back and work on it again a little bit later, then do this from the Gitpod dashboard. We can access that by clicking on the Gitpod icon here, or when we just go to the main Gitpod homepage and then click on the Go to App button in the top right, then that will also show all of our different workspaces. We can click on Open, and that will bring us back to where we left off. The reason is if you click on the little green Gitpod button each time, it will create a new version of the workspace which might not contain all of your work. So always reopen your workspace using this dashboard. So that's it for your first look at Gitpod. In the final video in this section, I want to introduce you to GitHub templates, and then we'll get you coding.